In the same way the name Type R will get fast Honda fanboys all hot and excited, the name Cupra will mean a lot to anyone who's owned or driven a fast Seat. If in the past you've bought a fast Seat Leon, you've owned a Seat Leon Cupra. But now that has changed, because this is a Cupra, but it's not a Seat. Cupra has become its own entity, in the same way DS is separate to Citroën and Polestar is separate to Volvo. So if you want a fast Leon, you'll be getting the keys to a Cupra Leon, and if you want a sporty Ateca SUV, it'll be a Cupra Ateca. This isn't a Leon though, as you can see, nor is it an Ateca. It's a Cupra Formentor, the first model developed entirely by Cupra. Cupra has taken an Ateca chassis and given it a unique body, finished here with a sweet matte blue paint and funky blue leather interior. There are 19-inch wheels, sports seats, a handful of drive modes, hydraulically controlled dampers, chunky ventilated disc brakes, all-wheel drive and a 7-speed double-clutch gearbox. There's also a badge that's, well, pretty bonkers and finished in bronze. First of all, that engine. It's essentially the same engine you'll find in a Cupra Leon, or a Golf R, or an Audi S3. 0 to 62 miles an hour, takes 4.9 seconds, and the top speed is 155 miles an hour. It's not a particularly characterful engine, although you can hear the turbo spooling up and whistling, but you can change that by hopping across the car's various drive modes. There's an off-road mode with hill descent control, then there's a normal mode, then beyond that there's a sport mode, an individual mode, and then a Cupra mode. In sport, you do get more noise than you do in normal mode, but still, considering this is a 310 horsepower hot SUV, it's relatively quiet. You're well insulated from the noise of the engine, and the exhaust doesn't exactly shout its mouth off. In Cupra mode is where the experience really changes. The throttle response is sharper, the steering heavier, the dampers firmer, and the gearbox at its most alert and eager, and the engine at its shoutiest. All of a sudden, your car is angry. You're encouraged to push harder. It's hard not to be encouraged. And the all-wheel drive system really works in the wet and the dry. And I know that because within 30 seconds of driving this car, for the very first time, the heavens opened. It's not a particularly aggressive all-wheel drive system either. It's not like you can feel the power moving around from corner to corner all the time. It's just very, very unfussy. It just gets on with its job and you don't really notice it. It's quite nice in some ways that whatever corner you attack, you know that the system is just going to be there to haul you out as efficiently as possible. For me, I think individual mode is the real sweet spot, because I can have the same steering weight as Cupra mode, I can have the same throttle response as Cupra mode, but I can turn the synthesized engine noise off. The DSG box? Well, it's what you'd expect from any other VW Group machine. In automatic mode, it's chilled and smooth. Wind the drive modes through to Sport or Cupra, and it'll drop down a few gears and stand ready and waiting. And then when you start using the paddles, it's quick to respond on the way up and more so on the way down. The brakes are decent enough, though the ABS kicks in a little early. Stronger Brembo brakes are available in the top spec trim, however. The suspension supports the car's weight well, while the dampers have 15 settings of adjustability. In your standard Comfort, Sport or Cupra settings, the dampers have presets. So the suspension is as it is because you've got coil springs rather than anything particularly fancy like air springs, and then the dampers can be made softer or they can be made firmer. In individual mode, there's a sliding scale, so you can make the dampers even softer than they are in comfort mode or even firmer than they are in Cupra mode. There are 15 individual settings for the dampers. 15 settings. Now, I'm all for flexibility, but I don't get the feeling that many people will be making that many minute adjustments. But if you do, my advice would be don't make it firmer than it is in Cupra mode, because if you do, it's just too stiff. Cupra mode on its own is already borderline too firm. The steering is good too. It's a little numb, but particularly in sport and in a Cupra mode, it's got a nice weight to it and it's quick as well. The only thing is, I think below, let's say 40 miles an hour, it's a bit too light for my liking. It's fair enough having light steering at manoeuvring speeds, but I think it's a bit too light for too long. I'd prefer a bit more weight once you get up above 30 miles an hour, say. What else do you need to know about the Cupra Formentor? Well, as a VW Group machine, the build quality is very good, with bits and bobs stolen from the likes of the Golf GTI. Thankfully, there's still a healthy enough balance between physical buttons and touch controls. The infotainment system is noticeably different to other VW products too, and is a little confusing at first, but once you get used to it, there's a lot to play with. A lot of the tech goodies are standard, including the virtual cockpit you'll find in an Audi. And the interior? It's just nice. It feels fresh, a step away from VW or Audi. Does the Cupra Formentor excite me? No, it doesn't. Personally, I would still go for a hot hatch because you're lower to the ground, there is less compromise. But as a hot SUV, it's quiet when you need to be, it's well equipped, and when you want to pick up the pace, it does respond.